So I think there's three core principles. One principle is obviously increase in speed. So that's a mandatory requirement that has to go up, and we're looking at about 100 megabit. I think the next bit is how the network evolves, and that evolution has got to happen in terms of the existing infrastructure, maximizing that existing infrastructure to reduce costs. So I think based upon those three principles, the market has changed quite dramatically, and we've seen within Europe about a 71% take-up of fast Ethernet, and I think that in terms of certain countries, we're seeing them with a 95% uptake. So countries like Belgium, countries like the Netherlands, even countries such as Malta and Lithuania, they're also picking up. So overall, I think that we're progressing well, but there's a lot more to be done. So I think there's two areas that need to be taken into consideration. And in the earlier plenary session today that we saw at Cable Congress, we saw what's happening in terms of the OTT providers, but as well as the existing cable providers. But I also think there's a different aspect in terms of looking at what's happening on the wireless stage. So we're seeing a large increase in terms of what's happening with 5G. And the EU have got basically a calendar on how they're going to evolve 5G up to 2020. And they're looking for each member state by 2020 to have at least one major city that's going to take on 5G network. So I think that that's going to basically make a dramatic difference in how we see things improving. We're also going to see, with 5G, we're going to see increase in terms of spectrum. So I think that if we look at 6 megahertz or over 6 megahertz, that's going to open up a whole new panacea in terms of connectivity, in terms of people that are going to want to get on the network. And that in turn, I think is going to lead to a difference in terms of the back end and the front end. So looking at higher capability in terms of small cells, how small cells are going to be distributed, etc. So overall, I see that there's going to be a dramatic change. So I think in terms of FTTH, if we look at FTTH, there needs to be an evolution, as I said earlier. So we need to see how it's going to be taken forward. So people are looking not only at FTTH, FTTC, FTTX generally, but they're also looking at a hybrid fiber copper, an HFC type network. So I think that the infrastructure as it stands today does have capability. I think it's all around economizing the cost of rollout, which is a key aspect. So how companies are going to do that, the likes of Liberty Global, the likes of how the OTT providers are going to do it. Cable Deutschland is another good example on how they're going to cost effectively roll that out to maximize the penetration and therefore to maximize what its capabilities could be. But it's all around the return on the investment as well. So the rollout's not happening as quickly as perhaps it could do. And I think that we'll see 2017 a paradigm shift in terms of how operators are going to be rolling out their cable infrastructure throughout the EU. So I think it's all around how they innovate in terms of the connectivity. So we're seeing that with the likes of HFC, we're seeing that companies are having to reassess how they're rolling out HFC networks. So it's looking at the amplifiers, it's looking at the power supplies, it's looking at how they're distributed, how effectively they're being utilized. I also think that it's looking at things like CMTS, so the cable modem termination point, and how they're going to be utilized in the future. So the importance around the question is really around the evolution of technology and how the cable operators are going to maximize that to ensure that gigabit speeds can be achieved effectively. And that's going to be an ongoing process. It's starting this year, starting with vengeance this year, and I'll see that between now and 2025, we're going to see an exponential growth in that area. We actually view that there could be up to, for the EU community, there could be up to maybe $1 trillion of extra revenue by 2025.